Pick up. Please, Suda, pick up. He was only 5 minutes away. He was at that high-end gala, the one he'd been talking about for months. The one where he was supposed to meet Ren Curry, the man who held the keys to the city's financial kingdom. I had been walking to meet him, to wait for him outside so we could share a cheap celebratory ramen afterward. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring he answered. Haru? I told you not to call me tonight unless it was an emergency. His voice was a sharp, hushed whisper. I could hear the clink of champagne glasses in the background, the low hum of expensive conversations, the sound of a world I didn't belong to. Suda. My voice came out as a broken rasp. I coughed and the taste of copper filled my mouth. Suda. I got hit. A car. I'm on 4th and Mason. I can't move my legs, Suda. Please. There was a pause. For a heartbeat I thought he would drop everything. I thought I'd hear the sound of him running, the sound of his voice breaking as he told me he was coming. Haru, listen to me, he said, his tone turning terrifyingly cold. I just saw him. Ren Curry just walked into the VIP lounge. He's standing 10 feet away from me. If I leave now, I lose everything I've worked for. Everything we worked for. I'm bleeding, I whispered, a tear tracking through the dirt and blood on my cheek. Suda, I'm scared. I think I'm dying. You're exaggerating, he snapped, though I could hear the tremor of guilt he was trying to suppress. You're always so dramatic, Haru. Call an ambulance. You have your insurance card, right? I'll come to the hospital as soon as the toast is over. I can't leave Ren Curry waiting. This is my future. Try to understand. Suda, please. I have to go. He's looking this way. Call 911, Haru. I love you, okay? Just be strong for me. The line went dead. I stared at the cracked screen until it timed out, leaving me in the dark. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the blood into the gutter. I lay there, my heart thudding against the pavement, and realized a truth that felt colder than the rain. I was a footnote in his success. I was the person he loved when it was convenient, but I was the person he'd step over to get where he wanted to go. I managed to call the emergency services, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. As the sirens began to wail in the distance, a strange, hollow peace settled over me. The pain was still there, white-hot and screaming, but the part of me that had lived for Suda, the part that had nurtured him and supported him through his leanest years, quietly flickered and went out. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. They told me I was lucky. A few inches to the left and the car would have crushed my spine. As it was, I had a shattered femur, 3 broken ribs, and a concussion that made the world tilt every time I closed my eyes. I waited for him. Through the surgery, through the grueling hours in the recovery room, I kept my eyes on the door. Every time it creaked open, my heart took a tiny, hopeful leap, only to be crushed again when a nurse walked in to check my vitals. Suda didn't show up that night. He didn't show up the next morning either. When he finally walked into my room at 2 in the afternoon the next day, he looked impeccable. His suit was tailored, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He was carrying a bouquet of lilies, the kind that smelled like funerals. Haru, he said, rushing to the side of the bed. He tried to take my hand, but I pulled it away, tucking it under the thin hospital blanket. The meeting went well, I take it? I asked. My voice was flat, devoid of the warmth he usually thrived on. He winced, sitting in the hard plastic chair by the bed. Ren Curry he's incredible, Haru. He actually listened to my proposal. He gave me his private card. Do you know what this means for us? The debt, the apartment. We won't have to worry anymore. I almost died, Suda. And I'm so sorry I wasn't there, he said, his eyes filling with easy, practiced tears. But look at you. You're okay. The doctor said you're going to make a full recovery. If I had left, I would have stayed a nobody. I did this for us. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I'd spent 3 years of my life protecting. I had worked double shifts at the library so he could finish his degree. I had skipped meals so he could buy the suits he needed for these very galas. I had been his shadow, his ghost, his silent support system. There is no us anymore, I said quietly. Suda laughed, a nervous, jerky sound. Don't be like that. You're just tired. The medication is making you moody. Once we get you home and I start this new contract with Curry's firm, everything will be perfect. I want you to leave, I said. Haru. Leave the flowers. Leave the room. Just go. He stood up, his face hardening. The mask of the grieving boyfriend slipped, revealing the ambitious man underneath. Fine. I'll give you some space. But don't forget, Haru, without my new position, we can't even afford this hospital room. You should be thanking me. He walked out, the click of his expensive shoes echoing in the hallway. I laid my head back on the pillow and stared at the ceiling. He was right about one thing, I couldn't afford this. The bills were already piling up on the nightstand. The insurance was refusing to cover the full cost of the surgery because of a technicality in the police report. I was 24 years old, broken in a dozen places and utterly alone. A week later, I was still in the hospital when the bills reached a tipping point. The collections department started calling my room. My friends, the few I had, stopped answering my texts when they realized I might ask for money or a place to stay. Suda had stopped calling entirely. Rumors were already circulating on social media that he was being seen at high-end clubs with Ren Curry's inner circle. I was sitting in my bed, staring at a total balance that looked like a phone number, when a man in a sharp gray suit walked into my room. He wasn't a doctor. He didn't carry a clipboard. He carried a leather briefcase and an air of absolute authority. "Mr. Aoki?" he asked. "Yes. My name is Mr. Vance. I represent a private medical intermediary." He sat down, not asking for permission. "I understand you are in a significant amount of financial distress. Your apartment has already been listed for sublet due to unpaid rent, and your medical debt is currently exceeding your total net worth by 300%. I felt a wave of nausea. "Why are you telling me this? I know I'm ruined." "I'm here to offer you a way out," Vance said, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a document. "A client of mine, a very high-profile individual, is in need of a specific biological match for a life-saving procedure. You, Mr. Aoki, are a perfect match. A 1 in a million rarity." I looked at the paper. "What kind of procedure?" "A partial organ donation. Completely legal, highly discreet. In exchange for your cooperation, all of your current debts will be erased. You will receive a stipend for recovery and a clean slate. You will never have to worry about money again." I thought about the rain. I thought about Suda's voice on the phone, telling me I was dramatic while I bled on the street. I thought about the fact that no one in the world would care if I disappeared tomorrow. "Who is the patient?" I asked. "The donor remains anonymous to the recipient, and the recipient remains anonymous to the donor," Vance said smoothly. "Those are the terms. Do you want to live the rest of your life running from debt collectors, or do you want to be free?" I picked up the pen. I didn't care who lived because of me. I didn't care if I survived the surgery. I just wanted to stop being the person who was always left behind. "Where do I sign?" I asked. As I scrawled my name on the bottom of the contract, I didn't know that the man I was saving was the very man Suda had abandoned me for. And I didn't know that Ren Curry was about to find out that his life was bought with the blood of the man he'd never even met. The door to my room swung open suddenly and a nurse rushed in, her face pale. "Mr. Aoki? There's a complication with your blood work. We need to move the procedure to tonight. The patient, he's failing." My heart hammered against my ribs. What was happening? "Is it dangerous?" The nurse looked at Mr. Vance, then back at me. Her silence was more terrifying than any answer she could have given. "We need to go. Now." Chapter 2. A body that finally has value. The white of the hospital ceiling became my entire universe. It wasn't the clean, hopeful white of a fresh start. It was the sterile, oppressive white of a waiting room for the end. Every hour was marked by the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum and the rhythmic, mocking hiss thump of the blood pressure cuff on my arm. I was alone. Truly, terrifyingly alone. Suda didn't come back. I checked my phone, the screen now a mosaic of jagged glass, every few minutes for the first 3 days. I told myself he was busy with Ren Curry. I told myself he was securing our future. But by the 4th day, the silence from his end grew louder than any scream. He didn't text. He didn't call. When I tried to reach out to our mutual friends, the responses were all variations of the same rehearsed script. "Oh, Haru, I'm so sorry to hear about the accident. I'd come visit, but work is just crazy right now. I'll try to stop by next week, okay? Hang in there." Next week never came. I realized then that my social circle was built on the foundation of Suda's ambition. I was the +1, the quiet boyfriend who kept the drinks refilled and the apartment clean. Without Suda to bridge the gap, I was just a liability. I was a broken boy in a bed, and in the world of the young and the climbing, illness is a social death sentence. Then came the bills. The first one arrived on a Tuesday. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. It wasn't just the surgery for my leg, it was the anesthesia, the overnight stay in the ICU, the physical therapy sessions I hadn't even started yet, and the administrative fees that felt like a slap in the face. My bank account was a puddle, and these bills were a tidal wave. When I tried to call the insurance company, a woman with a voice like sandpaper told me that because the police report listed the accident as unavoidable due to low visibility, they were contesting the claim. I was on the crosswalk, I told her, my voice trembling. I was right there. We'll take it under review, Mr. Aoki. In the meantime, the hospital requires a payment plan. I hung up and looked at my hands. They were pale and thin, the skin translucent. I felt like I was disappearing. I was a ghost haunting my own life. That was when Mr. Vance returned. He didn't knock, he just stepped into the room looking as sharp and lethal as a scalpel. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't offer sympathy. He simply laid a new set of folders on my tray table. The patient's condition has stabilized slightly, but the window for the transplant is narrowing, Vance said. We have finalized the debt erasure agreement. All your medical costs, past, present, and the upcoming transplant recovery, will be cleared. Additionally, we have arranged for a private recovery suite. You will want for nothing. I looked at the folder. And if I don't do it? Vance leaned in, his eyes cold. Then you will be discharged tomorrow morning. The hospital will sell your debt to a collection agency. Your credit will be destroyed, you will be evicted from your apartment, and you will have a permanent lien on any future wages. You are a young man, Haru. You don't want to start your life in a hole you can never climb out of. Start my life. I let out a dry, hollow laugh that hurt my ribs. What life? I have no one. My boyfriend left me for a career. My friends won't look at me. My body is broken. The only thing I have left of value is this. I gestured to my own torso. It was a devastating realization. My mind, my heart, my kindness, none of that had been enough to make Suda stay. None of that had been enough to make my friends care. The only thing about me that the world actually wanted was my literal flesh. I'll do it, I said. My voice was steady now. The fear had been replaced by a heavy, numbing apathy. I don't care who gets it. Just make the debt go away. I want to wake up and owe nothing to anyone. A wise choice, Vance said, handing me the pen. As I signed the final pages, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was the relief of a man falling off a cliff who finally stops clawing at the air and just accepts the ground is coming. I wasn't Haru Aoki, the librarian who loved old poetry and made the best miso soup. I was donor number 402. I was a biological resource. And for the first time in my life, that made me feel useful. The night of the surgery was a blur of preparation. They moved me to a different wing of the hospital, the private high-security wing. The walls here were covered in soft wallpaper instead of cold tile. The nurses moved like shadows, speaking in hushed tones. They prepped me for a partial liver donation. The liver regenerates, a surgeon explained, though he wouldn't look me in the eye. You'll be back to full health in a few months. But the recipient, he needs this tonight to survive the toxic buildup in his system. Is he a good man? I asked as they hooked up the 4 that would carry the anesthesia. The surgeon paused, his hand on the syringe. He is a powerful man. To many people, that is the same thing. I closed my eyes. Power. That word again. It was the thing Suda worshipped. It was the thing that had run me over in the street and left me to rot. And now, my very body was being harvested to keep that power alive. Ready? The anesthesiologist asked. Ready? I whispered. The last thing I thought of wasn't Suda's face. It wasn't the accident. It was the memory of a small garden my grandmother used to keep. She told me that some plants only bloom when they are pruned back to the root. I wondered if there would be anything left of me to bloom after this. Count backward from 10, a voice said. 10. 9. The world faded into a thick velvet blackness. I woke up in a room that smelled of lilies and expensive wax. The pain was different this time. It wasn't the sharp, jagged pain of broken bones. It was a deep, throbbing ache in my center, a sense of emptiness that felt physical. I tried to sit up, but a hand gently pressed on my shoulder. Easy, Mr. Aoki. You're still heavily sedated. It was a nurse, but not one I recognized. She was wearing a uniform that looked more like a hotel concierge's outfit. Is it over? I rasped. The surgery was a complete success. The recipient is in recovery. You've been asleep for nearly 24 hours. I looked around. This wasn't a hospital room. It was a suite. There were floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. There was a plush sofa, a television that looked like a piece of art, and a bouquet of flowers so large it must have cost more than my previous month's rent. Who sent the flowers? I asked, my heart skipping a beat. For a split second I thought maybe Suda had found out. Maybe he'd come back. They are from the estate of the recipient, the nurse said. Along with this. She handed me a small, cream-colored envelope. My fingers fumbled with the seal. Inside was a single card, heavy and embossed. The debt is settled. Your life is your own again. There was no signature. I leaned back against the silk pillows, tears pricking my eyes. I was free. I was debt-free, I had a roof over my head for the recovery period, and I never had to see Suda again. I should have felt like I'd won. But as I looked out at the city, at the thousands of lights representing thousands of people, I realized I had never felt more like a ghost. I had sold a piece of myself to buy a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. A few days later, I was allowed to take short walks down the hall. The private wing was quiet, nearly deserted. I stayed away from the other rooms, respecting the anonymity that had been the cornerstone of the agreement. But on the fourth night I couldn't sleep. The ache in my side was persistent, and the silence of the suite was starting to feel like a tomb. I put on my robe and limped out into the hallway, leaning heavily on a cane. The lights were dimmed. I wandered toward the end of the hall, where a large glass partition looked into a specialized recovery unit. There, through the glass, I saw him. He was surrounded by machines, wires snaking under the sheets of his bed. Even in sleep, even pale and weakened by surgery, he looked formidable. His features were sharp, his brow furrowed as if he were solving a problem even in his unconscious state. I knew that face. I had seen it on the covers of business magazines in the library. I had seen it on the news. Ren Curry. The man Suda had stayed at the gala for. The man who was the future Suda had chosen over my life. I stood there, frozen, my hand trembling on the handle of my cane. The irony was a physical weight, crushing the breath from my lungs. I had sacrificed my body to save the very man who had unwittingly stolen my soul. I was about to turn away to run back to my room and hide, when the man in the bed opened his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a dying man. They were dark, piercing, and startlingly clear. He looked through the glass, his gaze locking onto mine. There was a moment of profound, silent recognition, as if some invisible thread connected the piece of me inside him to the man standing in the hallway. He didn't know who I was. He couldn't. But then, Ren Curry did something that shattered my composure entirely. He didn't call for a nurse. He didn't look away. He slowly, painfully, lifted a hand and pressed his palm against the glass, right where I was standing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I should leave. I should go. But I couldn't move. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hallway opened, and I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. Mr. Curry? I have the updated reports you asked for. It was Suda. I panicked, ducking into a nearby alcove just as Suda walked past, his posture subservient, a folder clutched in his hand. He didn't see me. He walked straight toward Ren's room, his face glowing with the reflected light of the man he had traded me for. I sank to the floor, my back against the cold wall, my surgical incision screaming in protest. I had saved the man who held my ex-lover's future in his hands. And if Suda found out, if the world found out, I closed my eyes, realizing that the clean slate I'd been promised was actually a cage. And the man I had saved was the only one who held the key. Chapter 3, The Man Who Woke Up Owing Everything. The silence of my recovery suite was no longer a sanctuary, it was a cage of my own making. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ren Curry's hand pressed against the glass. I saw the way his dark eyes had searched mine, looking for a soul inside the resource he had consumed. I stayed in my room for 2 days after seeing Suda in the hallway. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to move. I lived in a state of constant, low-level panic, waiting for the moment the door would swing open and my past would collide with this strange, sterile present. I was standing by the window, watching the sunset bleed orange and violet over the city, when the heavy oak door to my suite opened. I didn't turn around. I thought it was the nurse with my evening medication. The view from here is meant to be grounding, a voice said. It wasn't the nurse. The voice was deep, resonant, and carried a weight of authority that made the air in the room feel suddenly thin. I turned slowly, my hand gripping my cane so hard my knuckles turned white. Standing in the doorway was Ren Curry. He was no longer the pale, dying man in the ICU. He was dressed in a black silk robe over tailored trousers, his presence filling the room. He looked healthy, unnervingly so. His skin had a glow that I knew, with a sickening jolt, was partly due to the piece of me now functioning inside him. He was a predator who had been fed, and he looked lethal. "Mr. Curry," I whispered. "You shouldn't be here." The agreement? It was anonymous. "I don't like mysteries, Haru Aoki," he said. He didn't move toward me, but his gaze pinned me to the spot. Especially when those mysteries involve the reason I'm still breathing. My heart hammered. "How did you find out?" Mr. Vance said. "Mr. Vance works for me," Ren interrupted, his voice smooth. "Everything in this hospital and most things outside of it belong to me in one way or another. I don't accept anonymous gifts. I pay my debts, and I need to know exactly what the price was." He finally took a step forward, his eyes narrowing as he took in my frail frame, the way I leaned on the cane, the hospital gown that hung loosely off my shoulders. "You're the man from the hallway," he murmured. "The one who looked at me like I was a ghost." I just wanted to see if you were okay," I lied, my voice shaking. "No," Ren said, his voice dropping an octave. "You looked at me with a grief that didn't belong to a stranger. You looked at me like I had stolen something from you." I turned back to the window, unable to meet his gaze. "You didn't steal anything. I sold it. It was a business transaction, Mr. Curry. My debt for your life. We're even. Are we?" He walked closer, stopping just a few feet behind me. I could smell him, sandalwood and expensive soap. "I spent the last 48 hours digging into the circumstances of your debt. It's a fascinating story, Haru. A hit and run on 4th and Mason. A call made to a phone that was active at a gala I attended. A call that was ignored." I felt the blood drain from my face. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the memory of the rain and the cold asphalt rushed back. "I have a new assistant," Ren continued, his voice like a velvet-wrapped blade. "A young man named Suda. Very ambitious. Very eager to please. He told me he missed a call that night from a disturbed ex, who was trying to sabotage his big break. He told me he had to choose between a toxic anchor and his future." I let out a shaky breath, a sob catching in my throat. Hearing Suda's lies reflected through Ren's mouth was a new kind of agony. "Is that what I am?" I asked, my voice breaking. "A toxic anchor?" Ren was silent for a long moment. Then I felt his hand on my shoulder. His touch was warm, so warm it felt like it was burning through my thin gown. I looked at the phone records, Haru. The call was placed exactly 3 minutes after the emergency services were notified of a pedestrian being struck. You weren't sabotaging him. You were dying. I turned to face him, tears finally spilling over. "Why does it matter to you? You got what you wanted. You're alive. Suda is your assistant. Why can't you just leave me alone?" Ren's expression shifted. The cold, calculating mask of the financier cracked, revealing something raw and turbulent underneath. He looked down at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that looked like guilt, or perhaps a terrifying sense of responsibility. Because I realized that while I was drinking champagne and listening to that man's pathetic pitch, "You were bleeding out because of me," Ren said. He didn't stay because he loved the work. He stayed because he wanted my power. My existence was the currency he used to pay for your abandonment. He stepped even closer, invading my personal space. He was so tall I had to crane my neck to look at him. "I indirectly destroyed your life without ever knowing your name," Ren whispered. "And then, in the ultimate irony, I used your body to repair mine. I don't just owe you a debt, Haru Aoki. I have absorbed your sacrifice. You are literally a part of me now." The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. It wasn't the way Suda looked at me, with a mixture of pity and utility. Ren looked at me like I was the most important thing in the world, and it terrified me. I wasn't used to being seen. I was used to being the shadow. "I don't want anything from you," I said, my voice a mere thread. "The debt is cleared. I just want to go." "Go where?" Ren asked, his grip on my shoulder tightening slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to make it clear he wasn't letting go. You have no apartment. Your belongings were tossed into the street by a landlord who didn't care if you were in surgery. Your friends haven't called once. You have nowhere to go. The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. I had been so focused on the freedom of being debt-free that I hadn't realized I was now a person with no place in the world. I was a blank slate, but the slate was empty and cold. I'll figure it out, I said, though I didn't believe it. No, Ren said. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. You will recover under my protection. I have a villa on the coast. It's quiet. There are staff to look after you. You will stay there until you are strong enough to stand on your own 2 feet without that cane. I can't accept that. People will talk. Your reputation. My reputation is built on the fact that I take what I want and I protect what is mine, Ren said. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. And right now, Haru, you are the only thing in this world that I truly owe. Before I could protest, the door to the suite burst open. Mr. Curry? I've been looking everywhere for. Suda stopped dead in his tracks. He was holding a stack of documents, his face flushed with the excitement of his new role. But as his eyes traveled from Ren to me, and then to Ren's hand still resting on my shoulder, the color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. Haru, he whispered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? I couldn't speak. The trauma of the last few weeks, the pain of the surgery, and the sheer shock of seeing Suda here in this room, made the world start to spin. Ren didn't move his hand. He didn't even turn to look at Suda. He kept his eyes locked on mine, a dark, protective fire burning in them. He's here because I invited him, Ren said, his voice cold enough to frost the windows. But, he's the donor? Suda gasped, the realization hitting him like a freight train. He looked at me, then at Ren's midsection and back to me. Haru, you gave him? He gave me his life, Ren said, finally turning his head to look at Suda. The look was lethal. The life you decided wasn't worth 5 minutes of your time. Suda dropped the documents. They scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. I didn't know. Haru, I thought you were just. Get out, Ren said. Mr. Curry, please, I can explain. Get out before I have security throw you out of the building. Ren's voice didn't rise, but the authority in it was absolute. And don't bother coming to the office tomorrow. Your contract is terminated. Suda looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a sudden, disgusting spark of greed. Haru, tell him. Tell him we're together. You love me, right? You did this for us. I looked at Suda, the man I had worshipped, the man I had starved for, and I felt nothing. No anger, no love, just a profound, hollow exhaustion. There is no us, Suda, I said quietly. You left me in the rain. Suda's face twisted into a mask of rage. You little brat. You think you're special now because you've got his attention? You're a charity case. You're nothing without me. He lunged forward, his hand raised as if to grab me, but Ren was faster. In a movement so fluid it was terrifying, Ren stepped in front of me, his arm acting as an unbreakable shield. He caught Suda's wrist in midair, the sound of the grip echoing in the room. Touch him, Ren whispered, and I will ensure that the rest of your life is spent wishing you had stayed in the rain that night. Suda whimpered, the strength leaving him instantly. Ren shoved him toward the door. Suda stumbled, scrambled to his feet, and ran out of the room without looking back. The silence that followed was heavy. I felt my legs starting to give way. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the raw ache of my body. Haru. Ren caught me before I hit the floor. He lifted me easily as if I weighed nothing at all, and carried me back to the bed. He laid me down with a gentleness that didn't match the man I had seen seconds ago. Rest, he said, tucking the blanket around me. Why are you doing this? I whispered, my eyes fluttering shut. You don't even know me. Ren sat on the edge of the bed. He reached out, his thumb brushing a stray tear from my cheek. I know that you gave away a piece of yourself to save a stranger who didn't deserve it, he said softly. And I know that I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel like you have to give anything away ever again. As I drifted off into a medicated sleep, one thought kept circling my mind. Suda was gone. My debt was gone. But as I looked at Ren Curry's shadow on the wall, I realized I had traded one kind of bond for another. I had saved a king and now I was his prisoner. Or was I his treasure? The next morning, I woke up to find my hospital room empty of my old clothes. In their place was a suitcase filled with the finest silks and wools I had ever touched. And on top of the suitcase was a note in elegant, bold handwriting. The car is waiting. It's time to go home. But as I stepped into the black sedan waiting downstairs, I saw a black SUV following us at a distance. Inside, I caught a glimpse of a familiar, desperate face. Suda wasn't finished. And I realized that by saving Ren, I hadn't just ended my old life, I had started a war. Chapter 4, Kindness Without Demands. The villa was a fortress of glass and white stone, perched on a cliffside where the ocean air tasted of salt and expensive solitude. It was the kind of place I had only seen in the background of Suda's vision boards, this someday he was always chasing. Now I was living in it, and every step I took with my cane on the polished marble floors felt like an intrusion. I was a smudge of gray on a canvas of perfect white. Ren didn't say much as he led me through the foyer. He walked with a slight stiffness, a reminder that we were both healing from the same wound, though his was internal and mine was a jagged line across my torso. "This is the East Wing," Ren said, gesturing to a set of double doors. "It's quiet here. You have your own terrace. The staff has been instructed to give you space, but they are available 24 hours a day if you need anything. Anything at all." "Thank you, Mr. Curry," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I kept my eyes on my shoes. I'll try to stay out of the way. If there's any work I can do while I recover, filing, organizing, anything, please let me know. I don't want to be a burden." Ren stopped walking. I could feel his gaze on the top of my head, heavy and unreadable. "You are not an employee, Haru," he said, his voice low. "And you are certainly not a burden. You're a guest. More than a guest. I'm not used to sitting still," I lied. The truth was, I wasn't used to being cared for. In my relationship with Suda, I was the caretaker. I was the one who made sure the bills were paid, the fridge was full, and his suits were pressed. Being on the receiving end of such immense, unearned luxury made my skin crawl with anxiety. "Then learn," Ren said, and for a second I thought he was being cold. But when I looked up, his expression was strangely soft. "Learn how to just exist, Haru. That is all I require of you." The first few days were the hardest. I spent most of my time in the room Ren had assigned to me. It was larger than the entire apartment I had shared with Suda. The bed was like a cloud, the sheets smelling of lavender and fresh air, but I found myself sleeping on the small sofa by the window instead. The bed felt too big, too intentional. I felt like if I stayed in it too long, I would forget how to be the person who had to fight for every inch of space in the world. Ren was a ghost in his own home. He was a man of intense discipline. I would see him through the glass of his study early in the morning, surrounded by monitors and phones, his brow furrowed as he moved pieces of the world's economy like a grandmaster on a chessboard. He was the feared strategist the media spoke of, the man whose world bent to his will. Yet, every evening at exactly 7 o'clock, there would be a light knock on my door. "Dinner is served on the terrace if you feel up to it," he would say. He never demanded. He never even waited for an answer. He simply left the option open, a door left slightly ajar. On the fourth night I finally joined him. The sun was dipping below the horizon, turning the sea into a sheet of hammered gold. Ren was already seated, a glass of sparkling water in front of him. He looked up as I limped toward the table, and for a moment, his eyes tracked the way I leaned on my cane. He didn't offer to help. He knew by now that I hated the feeling of being handled, but he did pull out the chair across from him, waiting until I was settled. "The chef prepared sea bass," Ren said. "I'm told it's good for recovery. Lean protein." "Thank you," I said. I picked up my fork, but my hands were shaking. "You don't have to do this, you know. I know you're busy. Mr. Vance told me you haven't taken a day off in 3 years." Ren took a slow sip of his water. "I had a perspective shift recently. It turns out, when you almost die, the stock market looks a lot less interesting than a sunset." He paused, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "Why do you keep doing that?" "Doing what?" "Apologizing. For the space you take up. For the food you eat. For the fact that you're alive." I looked down at my plate. I know the value of things, Mr. Curry. I know how much this cost. I know how much your time is worth. I'm just a person who happened to be a match. I don't want you to feel like you're obligated to be my friend. Is that what you think this is? Obligation? Isn't it? I asked, a sudden spark of bitterness catching in my chest. Everyone wants something, Ren. Suda wanted my support so he could get to you. You want to clear your conscience so you can go back to being the man who doesn't owe anyone anything. I'm just the middleman for everyone's goals. Ren didn't flinch. He leaned back, his silhouette sharp against the dying light. Suda was a fool, he said flatly. He had the only thing in the world that can't be bought, and he traded it for a business card that I would have given to a courier. He did what he had to do, I whispered, the old habit of defending Suda rising up like a reflex. He was scared of being poor. I understood that. I wasn't enough to make him feel safe. You shouldn't have to be enough to keep someone from leaving you in the dirt, Haru, Ren said, his voice turning dangerous. That's not love. That's a hostage situation. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the crashing of the waves below. But the question that had been burning in Ren's mind finally broke through his composure. Why did you do it? He asked. The donation. You knew the risks. You were already injured from the accident. Why would you agree to give a piece of yourself to a stranger when you were at your lowest point? I put my fork down. I looked out at the ocean, thinking about that night in the hospital when Mr. Vance had offered me the deal. I thought about the way the rain had felt on my skin, and the way Suda's voice had sounded on the phone, the sound of a door locking me out. Because I didn't think I had a future anyway, I said quietly. Ren went perfectly still. What do you mean? The night I got hit, when I was lying on the pavement, I realized that I had spent my entire life trying to be what other people needed. I was the perfect grandson, the perfect student, the perfect boyfriend. And yet, the second I was the one who needed something, the second I was the one who was broken, everyone vanished. I realized that my only value was what I could provide. If I couldn't be a boyfriend or a worker, what was I? I looked at Ren, and for the first time I didn't feel shy. I felt empty. When Mr. Vance told me someone needed my organ to live, I thought, at least this way my life counts for something. If I die on the table, the debt is gone and someone important gets to keep going. It felt like the most logical use of a life that was already over. The silence that followed was heavy. I expected Ren to offer some platitude, some wealthy man's version of, everyone is special. Instead, Ren stood up. He walked around the table and knelt down beside my chair. It was a shocking gesture, this man who the world feared, kneeling on the hard stone for a boy who had nothing. He took my hand in his. His palm was calloused, firm, and incredibly warm. You saved me because you thought you were worthless, Ren murmured, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't identify. You gave me the chance to keep my empire because you didn't think you had a reason to wake up the next day. It was a good trade, I said, a tear escaping and hitting our joined hands. It was a tragedy, Ren corrected. He squeezed my hand, his eyes searching mine with a terrifying intensity. Haru, look at me. I looked. I didn't just take your liver. I took your hope. And I am going to spend every second of my life giving it back to you. Not because I owe you. Not because of a contract. But because a world that makes a man like you feel like he's nothing is a world I want to burn down. And I'm very good at burning things down. For the first time since the accident, I felt a tiny flickering heat in my chest. It wasn't the searing pain of betrayal or the cold ache of the hospital. It was something else. It was the feeling of being seen, not as a resource, not as a tool, but as a person. I didn't know how to handle it. I pulled my hand away, my breath hitching. I should go to bed. I'm tired. Haru. Please, Ren. It's too much. I hurried back to my room as fast as my cane would allow, my heart hammering against my ribs. I closed the door and leaned against it, gasping for air. He was dangerous. Not because he was powerful, but because he was kind in a way that made me want to believe him. And believing him was the most dangerous thing I could do. I moved to the window to close the curtains, but something caught my eye in the driveway far below. A car was parked at the edge of the estate's gates. It was a cheap beat-up sedan, a car I knew all too well. The headlights flickered once, then twice. Suda. He was still there. He was watching. And as I saw a dark figure step out of the car and look up at the villa, a cold dread settled over me. Suda didn't just want Ren's power. He wanted me back, not because he loved me but because I was now the only bridge left to the world he had lost. I turned away from the window, but as I did, my phone, the new one Ren had bought for me, buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. I know what you did, Haru. I know you sold yourself to him. Do you think a man like Ren Curry actually wants a broken thing like you? He's just keeping his investment safe. Come outside. Let's talk before I tell the press exactly how the great Ren Curry bought his life. The room felt like it was spinning. I looked at the door, then back at the phone. I was no longer the man who was left behind. I was the prize in a game between two powerful men, and I realized with a jolt of terror that I had no idea which one was going to destroy me first. Chapter 5. The Man Who Chose Wrong returns. The screen of the phone felt like it was burning my palm. I stared at Suda's message until the words blurred into a jagged smear of ink. A broken thing. That was always his favorite weapon, reminding me that without him, I was a collection of fragments that no one else would bother to pick up. I didn't tell Ren. I watched him through the security monitors in the hallway as he sat in his study, his head bowed over a map of some distant shipping lane. He looked tired. For the first time, I noticed the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the weight of a world that never stopped demanding things from him. I couldn't add my ghost to his pile. I grabbed my coat and my cane, slipping out through the side entrance of the villa. The night air was sharp, biting through my thin sweater, but I welcomed it. I needed to feel the cold to know I wasn't dreaming. I made it to the edge of the long, winding driveway where the massive wrought iron gates stood like sentinels. Suda was leaning against his car, smoking a cigarette. When he saw me, he dropped it, grinding it into the dirt with a frantic, desperate motion. "Haru," he breathed, taking a step toward the bars. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept since Ren fired him. "You came. I knew you'd come." "Stop texting me, Suda," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Go home. There's nothing for you here. There's you." He reached through the bars, his fingers clawing at the air. "Haru, listen to me. I made a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. I was under so much pressure. I thought if I could just get that contract, I could give you the life you deserved. I did it for us, Haru. I swear." I looked at him, and for a moment I tried to find the man I had loved. I tried to find the warmth I used to feel when he'd come home and press his cold face against my neck. But there was nothing. It was like looking at a stranger wearing the skin of someone I used to know. "You left me in the rain, Suda," I said quietly. "I told you I was dying, and you told me I was being dramatic." "I was scared," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I saw Ren Curry walk into that room and I panicked. I thought if I left, I'd be back in that basement apartment forever. I thought you'd be okay. You're always so strong, Haru. You always handle everything. I didn't handle being hit by a car. But look at you now." Suda's eyes darted to the massive villa behind me, then back to my face. A sickening flash of greed crossed his features. "You're living like a prince. You've got the best doctors, the best clothes. You're only here because I stayed at that gala. If I had come to you, we'd both be broke and miserable right now. In a way. I saved you, didn't I?" The sheer, staggering narcissism of his words hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't apologizing. He was trying to rewrite history so he could be the hero of my tragedy. "You didn't save me," I said, my voice rising. "You discarded me. You sold my life for a chance to stand in a room with a man who doesn't even know your middle name. And the only reason I'm in this house is because I gave away a piece of my body to fix the mess you helped create." Suda's face hardened. He let out a sharp, ugly laugh. "Oh, please. You think he cares about you? Ren Curry is a strategist, Haru. He's keeping you here because he has a conscience issue. He feels indebted. But men like him don't love people like us. Once he feels like he's paid you back, he'll toss you out just like I did. But I've known you since we were kids. I'm the only one who knows the real you. The real me is the person who almost died because of you," I countered. "The real me is the person who realized that being alone is better than being with someone who weighs my life against a business deal and finds me lacking." "Haru, please," he whimpered, switching back to his pathetic tone. He fell to his knees on the gravel, his hands gripping the iron bars. "I lost everything. Ren blacklisted me. No one in the city will hire me. I have no money, no place to stay. You have to help me. Tell him to give me my job back. Tell him you forgive me. He'll listen to you." I looked down at him. This was the man who had been my entire world. This was the man I had skipped meals for. "No," I said. "Haru. I'm not a bridge for you to walk on anymore, Suda. I'm not a resource. I'm just me. And me doesn't want anything to do with you. I turned to walk away, my cane clicking rhythmically on the pavement. You'll regret this. Suda screamed behind me. You're nothing but a spare part to him. A donor. He's looking at you and seeing a medical miracle, not a man. You think he'll ever touch you? You think he'll ever love a body that's been cut open because of him? I froze. That was the fear. The deep, dark whisper in the back of my mind that I had been trying to ignore. That Ren saw me as a debt to be serviced, a project to be managed. He's right about one thing. The voice came from the shadows of the driveway. Ren stepped into the moonlight, his overcoat draped over his shoulders, his expression unreadable. I hadn't even heard him approach. Suda scrambled to his feet, his face lit with a desperate hope. Mr. Curry? Sir. I was just telling Haru how much I regret. Ren ignored him completely. He walked straight to me, stopping so close I could feel the heat radiating from him in the cold night. He looked down at me, his eyes searching mine. He's right that I look at you and see something extraordinary, Ren said, his voice loud enough to carry to the gate. But he's wrong about why. Ren turned his head slightly, his profile sharp and lethal as he looked toward Suda. You didn't lose him because of me, Suda, Ren said, each word like a falling guillotine. You lost him the moment you decided that power was more important than the person who gave you the strength to seek it. You didn't leave a toxic anchor behind. You left the only thing in your life that was actually real. Mr. Curry, please? If I ever see your car near these gates again, Ren continued, his voice dropping to a low, terrifying growl, I won't just blacklist you. I will make sure the world forgets you ever existed. Now, get in your car and drive until you run out of road. Suda looked at Ren, then at me. He saw the way Ren was standing, shoulders squared, positioned perfectly between me and the gate. He saw that there was no more room for manipulation. With a choked sob, Suda scrambled into his car, the tires spitting gravel as he sped away into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. The adrenaline that had kept me upright vanished and my knees finally gave out. Ren caught me before I hit the ground. He didn't just hold me up, he gathered me into his arms, lifting me against his chest. I buried my face in his coat, the scent of sandalwood and winter air surrounding me. And then the dam broke. I cried. I cried for the boy who had been hit by a car and left to die. I cried for the years I had spent making myself small so Suda could feel big. I cried for the piece of me that was gone, and the terrifying, beautiful unknown that was ahead. Ren didn't tell me to stop. He didn't tell me I was being dramatic. He just held me, his chin resting on top of my head, his heartbeat steady and strong against my ear, a heartbeat that I had helped keep going. I'm sorry, I sobbed into his chest. I'm so sorry. For what? He whispered. For being so broken. For making you deal with all of this. Ren pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. He reached up, his thumb brushing away the tears with a tenderness that shattered what was left of my defenses. You aren't broken, Haru, he said. You were just used by people who didn't know how to handle something precious. You are the strongest person I have ever met. You survived the dark alone. Imagine what you can do now that you don't have to. He carried me back toward the villa, the lights of the house glowing like a sanctuary in the distance. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back to see if someone was following me. I was looking forward. But as we reached the doors, I felt Ren's grip tighten. Haru, he said softly. Yes. Tomorrow I have to go back to the city. There is a board meeting. They are questioning my distraction. They want to know why I'm spending so much time at a coastal villa with a private guest. I felt a chill. What will you tell them? Ren looked at me and for a second the strategist was gone. There was only the man. I'm going to tell them that I've finally found an investment worth more than the rest of the world combined, he said. But that means the spotlight will be on you. They will try to tear you apart to get to me. Are you ready for that? I looked at the house, then at my own hands. I wasn't the boy in the rain anymore. As long as you don't leave me behind, I said. Ren leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. Never again. Chapter 6, Chosen Without Obligation. The city was a jagged mouth of glass and steel, waiting to swallow anyone who wasn't hard enough to bite back. Returning to it felt like re-entering a battlefield after a long, quiet truce. As Ren's black sedan glided through the rain-slicked streets of the financial district, I watched the people on the sidewalks, thousands of souls hurrying toward their own ambitions, their own heartbreaks. A month ago I was one of them. I was the person who would have stepped into the gutter to let someone like Ren Curry pass. Now I was sitting beside him, my hand resting on the leather upholstery, just inches away from his. The news of Ren's miraculous recovery had already hit the press, and with it, the whispers. The board of directors at Curry Holdings was restless. They didn't like the mystery of the donor, and they liked even less the fact that their cold, calculating CEO had spent weeks in seclusion with an unknown companion. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. I was wearing a suit Ren had commissioned for me, charcoal wool that felt like armor. I looked like I belonged in his world, but inside I still felt like the boy bleeding on 4th and Mason. Ren didn't look away from the window. "I have spent my entire life playing a game where the rules are written by men who value nothing but growth. They think my survival is a victory for the company. I'm going to show them that my survival was a victory for me." He turned to me then, his dark eyes softening. "You don't have to say a word, Haru. You just have to stand there. Let them see the man who is more powerful than their spreadsheets." The boardroom was a tomb of mahogany and silence. 12 men and women sat around a table that cost more than my parents' house. When we walked in, the temperature seemed to drop. Every eye turned to me, some with curiosity, some with blatant disdain. "Mr. Curry," one of the older men said, his voice like dry parchment, "we are pleased to see you in such robust health. However, the rumors regarding the source of your transplant and the nature of your current living arrangements are causing a fluctuate in the stock. We need a statement. A clarification of the debt involved." Ren didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, his hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. "There is no debt," Ren said, his voice echoing with a calm, lethal authority. "Because you cannot put a price on a life that was given freely. Mr. Aoki is not a source. He is the person who saved this company by saving me, and he did so when he had every reason to let the world burn." "He was paid, was he not?" a woman asked, her lip curling. "A debt erasure? That makes it a transaction, Ren. It makes him an asset." I felt the old familiar sting of humiliation. I felt like a thing again, a piece of hardware that had been installed to keep the machine running. I started to shrink back to lower my gaze, but then I felt Ren's hand move. He didn't just touch my shoulder, he took my hand right there in front of the most powerful people in the city. He laced his fingers with mine, pulling me flush against his side. "If he is an asset," Ren said, looking the woman dead in the eye, "then he is the only one this company has that isn't for sale. From this moment on, Haru Aoki is under my personal protection. Any inquiry into his past, any attempt to harass or belittle him, will be treated as a direct attack on me. And you all know how I handle attacks." The room went silent. The power in Ren's voice wasn't the power of money, it was the power of a man who had finally found something he was willing to lose everything for. We walked out of that room without waiting for a response. We walked past the secretaries and the security guards, past the cameras flashing in the lobby, and out into the cool evening air. It wasn't until we were back at the penthouse, Ren's city residence, that the silence between us changed. The penthouse was high above the noise, a glass box suspended in the clouds. I stood at the window looking out at the city lights, feeling the weight of the day finally settle into my bones. "They hate me," I said quietly. "They fear you," Ren corrected, stepping up behind me. He didn't touch me yet. "They fear you because they can't figure out what you want. They understand greed. They don't understand sacrifice." I turned to face him. This was the moment. The question that had been rotting in the back of my mind since the hospital, the one that Suda had planted like a weed. "Ren," I said, my voice trembling, "am I here because you owe me?" Ren stopped. The city lights reflected in his eyes, making them look like deep pools of ink. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think," I said, a tear finally breaking free. "You're a man of honor. You're disciplined. You don't like owing people. I gave you my liver, Ren. I gave you your life. Every time you look at me, do you just see the debt you have to pay back? Is this house, these clothes, this protection? Is it just a very expensive thank you note?" Ren took a step forward, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat of his breath on my forehead. He reached out, his hands cupping my face with a ferocity that startled me. "Listen to me, Haru Aoki," he whispered, his voice thick with an intensity that made my heart hammer against my ribs. I could have paid your debt and sent you on your way with $1 million. I could have bought you a house in another country and never looked at you again. That would have settled the debt. That would have cleared my conscience. He leaned down, his eyes searching mine, demanding that I see the truth. I didn't bring you to the villa because I owed you. I brought you there because when I woke up from that surgery, the only thing I wanted to see was the face of the man who thought his life was over. I wanted to see if I could make you smile. I wanted to see if I could be the one person who didn't leave you behind. But the transplant... The transplant gave me time, Ren interrupted. But you, Haru, you gave me a reason to use it. I have spent 40 years building a world of stone and cold numbers. I was dying long before my liver failed. I was empty. He slid his hands down to my neck, his thumbs brushing my jawline. You are not here because I owe you, he said, each word a vow. You are here because you lived when the world expected you to disappear. You are here because you are the only person who ever saw me not as a strategist or a patron, but as a man worth saving. And I am here because I love you. The word hung in the air, heavy and golden. Well, not the shallow, conditional love Suda had offered. Not the love that demanded I be a support system or a ghost. This was a love that was a choice. A mutual, terrifying, beautiful choice. I saved you because I thought I was nothing, I whispered, reaching up to grip his wrists. But when I'm with you, I feel like I'm finally someone. You were always someone, Haru, Ren murmured. I'm just the lucky man who got to find you. He leaned in then, and when his lips met mine, it wasn't a transaction. It wasn't a repayment. It was a collision of two souls who had both been used by power, finally finding a place where power didn't matter. It was soft, then desperate, a hunger that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with belonging. I pulled back just an inch, my forehead resting against his. What happens now? The board, the press. Suda. Suda is a ghost, Ren said. The board will learn to adapt. And the press will eventually find a new scandal. He took my hand, leading me toward the terrace where the world felt small and the stars felt close. As for us, Ren said, we're going to do something neither of us has ever done before. What's that? Ren smiled, a real genuine smile that reached his eyes and stayed there. We're going to live for ourselves. No more sacrifices. No more debts. Just us. As we stood on the balcony looking out over the kingdom Ren had built, I realized that the man I had saved wasn't just Ren Curry. By saving him, I had saved the version of myself that was worth loving. I wasn't the boy who was left behind in the rain anymore. I was the man who had walked through the storm and found a home in the heart of the lightning. We were two broken things that had found a way to be whole, not by fixing each other but by choosing to stay. And in a world that always chooses power, choosing each other was the greatest victory of all.